Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're stepping into a slightly different space. Usually, we're curating articles, maybe dissecting a trending book.
Right.
Today, we are conducting what feels more like a transmission. We've received a transcript from a source, and it's titled, "It Took Me 25 Years to Learn This."
And on the surface, you read it and you think, okay, this is a collection of success stories. You see names like Andrew Carnegie, Henry Ford, Abraham Lincoln.
Exactly. You think it's another list of productivity hacks. But as we've looked closer, you realize this isn't an operating manual for your business. It's an operating manual for your being.
That is a profound distinction, and it's really the core of what we're talking about today. We are not here to discuss, how to optimize your calendar or hack your morning routine.
No.
The material we're analyzing, it frames success as the law. And when the source uses that word law, they're not referring to legal statutes. They're talking about physics.
Physics, like as in gravity.
It's exactly like gravity. They're suggesting that there are these invisible principles, these mechanics of the spirit, that govern cause and effect just as rigorously as gravity governs the motion of planets.
So that's our mission today. We're acting as educators for the Source Studios, and our whole goal is to bridge the gap between two worlds that seem very far apart.
Two very different worlds.
On one hand, you have neuroscience, the literal physical hardwiring of your nervous system, and on the other, ancient wisdom, the sort of software that's guided human potential for centuries. We want to understand how these hidden laws actually physically rewire a human being.
Precisely. We're moving beyond the purely theoretical. We want to look at the biological hook. How do these laws actually interact with your amygdala? How do they literally change the neural pathways in your brain?
And then from there, we make what we're calling the mystical pivot.
Right. To understand what all that biology means for your soul, for your presence, for your actual lived future.
The source outlines three very specific laws for us. The first is the law of hidden seeds. The second, the law of definite direction. And the third, the law of inner expansion. But before we get into the laws themselves, we have to start where the source starts.
With the narrative foundation.
Yes. The source calls this the thunderclap of meaning.
And it begins with a story. A simple story.
Yeah.
And the setting is so crucial. It's not a boardroom. It's not some big flashy stage.
No. It's a department store in Pittsburgh on a rainy afternoon.
A rainy afternoon.
So let's just set the scene for a moment. It's gray outside. It's wet. The store is probably pretty quiet, filled with that sort of heavy rainy day lethargy.
We all know that feeling.
And into this environment walks an old lady. The source is very specific about her appearance. She looked like one who had no intention of buying. She was just wandering aimlessly, maybe looking for shelter more than she's looking for merchandise.
Okay, so let's pause there and look at the biological OS, the operating system, the sales staff in that store. We have to understand the neuroscience of a salesperson on a slow day.
What's their brain doing?
Their brain is running a predictive algorithm. It is constantly scanning the environment for one thing, reward. And the part of the brain that does that filtering, the reticular activating system, or the RAS, is asking a constant question.
Is this relevant? Is this valuable?
Exactly. Is this person a signal, or are they just noise?
Yeah.
And in this case, the algorithm for almost every clerk on that floor returned a negative result.
They saw noise. The source says they gave her the once-over and then they literally turned their backs. They started busying themselves with shelves, arranging things specifically so they wouldn't be troubled.
Because their brains labeled her as a low probability of reward target. This is what we call the predictive shield. We all have it. It's an energy conservation mechanism.
Their shield to
Yeah.
protect our energy.
Yes. The brain says engaging with this person offers a very low probability of a dopamine reward. No commission, no big sale, no important connection. Therefore, do not engage. Conserve energy for a better opportunity. They were treating the moment as a transaction that just hadn't happened yet.
But then something happens. There's an anomaly in the data. One young man, just one, steps forward. He breaks the pattern.
It breaks the collective trance.
He approaches the lady with what the source calls quiet courtesy, and he just asks if he might serve her.
And this is the pivot. Because she tells him the truth. She says, I'm just waiting for the rain to stop. I'm not buying anything.
Right there, that's the out. In a normal biological loop, this is where the interaction ends. The hunt, so to speak, is over. There's no kill. The salesperson withdraws to conserve energy for the next hunt.
But this young man doesn't. He overrides that deep primal impulse. He stays. He engages her in a real conversation.
And the source makes a point of this. not to extract a sale, but to give respect where respect was due. He's treating her not as a potential customer, but as a human being, as a guest.
And then it goes even further. When the rain finally stops, he doesn't just wave goodbye from the door.
No, he walks her all the way to the street. He raises her umbrella for her, and the text notes he did this as though she were his own mother.
Think about what that requires neurologically. He decoupled his action from the expectation of a reward. That is a very sophisticated, very evolved neurological state. He moved from a transactional state, I do this to get that, to a pure state of being.
He was kind because he was kind.
Exactly. He was kind because that was the frequency his nervous system was tuned to, not because he was hoping for a cookie at the end of it.
And then he goes back to work. The incident completely falls out of his mind. The source says, as good deeds often do, he forgets about it entirely.
And that is the hidden seed. The action was performed in a total vacuum. There was no applause. There was no commission check waiting for him. It was a pure, unattached output of energy into the world.
Until months later,
the feedback loop closes.
The young man is called into his manager's office. There's a letter. It's from a lady, and she's requesting that a specific salesman be sent all the way to Scotland. To take an order for furnishing an entire mansion. An order the source calls of enormous size.
And there's a condition on the order, isn't there?
There is. She wants that young man, the one, she writes, who treated her like a person when she looked like no opportunity.
And now the big reveal. Who was this old lady?
She was the mother of Andrew Carnegie.
Andrew Carnegie? The Titan of Steel? At that moment in history, one of the wealthiest, most powerful men on the entire planet.
The source says, in that moment, his life swung on a hidden hinge.
A hidden hinge? What a terrifying and beautiful concept.
It really is. We think our lives swing on these big, obvious moments, the graduation day, the wedding, the big job interview. But this source suggests that the real hinge, the one that changes everything, was a random gray Tuesday afternoon.
It forces you to confront what the source calls the cruel truth. That most of us, most people, spend their entire lives looking for the big break. They're waiting for the golden door to open. They want the viral moment, the lottery ticket.
While stepping right over the thing that leads to it.
They're stepping right over the small acts of service. They're stepping over the nobodies in the rain who are actually the gatekeepers to those golden doors. It completely changes how you should look at a boring afternoon, doesn't it?
Completely. It feels like it suggests that the universe or life or whatever you want to call it is constantly testing the integrity of your operating system.
That's a great way to put it. It sends you these little low-value data packets just to see how you process them. Do you treat them with the same integrity as the high-value ones?
Which brings us to our first moment of what we call inquisitive engagement. We want to just pause the transmission right here and ask you, the listener, a direct question.
So just take a breath and really look at your own life. Here's the question.
If the single biggest opportunity of your life was standing in front of you right now, but it was disguised as an inconvenience or a boring task or a person who couldn't help you, would you have the eyes to see it?
Or would your predictive shield, that automatic filter, just label it as noise and turn away?
That is the fundamental question of presence, isn't it? Are you actually seeing reality, or are you just seeing your brain's projection of what's valuable?
Let that one just sit with you for a moment.
So now let's move into the mechanics. How does someone pass that test? We're going to dissect the 3 laws that make it possible. Part 1 is the law of hidden seeds.
And the central concept here, the big idea, is service precedes reward.
The source makes this fascinating and really critical distinction between 2 fundamental worldviews, the market and the field.
This is so vital to understand. The drifter, the person who struggles, who feels stuck, views life as a market.
A market. Okay, what does that mean?
A market is purely transactional. It's immediate. It's pay me first, and then I will give you the goods. Or show me the opportunity, and then I'll work hard. If the money isn't on the table, if the reward isn't visible, the work doesn't happen.
It's that minimum viable effort mindset. You hear it all the time. Well, I don't get paid enough to do that.
Exactly. And that's a biological protective mechanism. It's about conserving energy. But the source argues, and this is the key, that life is not a market. Life is a field.
A field, that implies agriculture, biology. Something organic.
Yes. In a field, you must plant the seed first. You
Yeah.
have to. Then you have to water it. You have to protect it from weeds, from pests. And for a long time, weeks, maybe months, You see nothing. The soil looks exactly the same as it did before you started.
There's no immediate reward, no dopamine hit.
None. And this is where most people give up. They want the harvest on the day they plant the seed. But the law of the field says the growth is happening underground, in the dark, where no one can see it.
The source has a name for this. It calls it invisible capital.
Invisible capital. Every single time you give your best without recognition, every time you go the extra mile when no one is watching, you are banking delayed interest. You are fundamentally altering your own cellular memory.
You're not just doing a good job, you're dans et mer. You're teaching your body something.
You're teaching your nervous system that you are a generator of value, not just a trader of value. And that is a world of difference.
The source gives us some really powerful historical examples to ground this concept. Let's start with Henry Ford.
Ford is the absolute archetype of the hidden seed. Before the fame, before the Model T, before the assembly line, he was just a mechanic tinkering in a shed.
And people thought he was crazy.
They actively ridiculed him. The source notes that his neighbors called him a fool. They heard these loud noises, saw these engines that kept exploding. They saw a man wasting his time on a ridiculous fantasy.
Who was working in silence and in the dark.
And that silence is such a critical component of this law. He wasn't performing for an audience. He wasn't posting his progress for likes. He was performing for the vision inside his own head. The text says it so perfectly. His invisible hours became his visible empire.
That's powerful, the invisible hours.
All those nights in the shed, all that ridicule.
Yeah.
That was him planting seeds in the dark. That was him accumulating invisible capital.
And then there's the other story, the coal miner. This one feels very heavy, very real.
It's the story of neuroplasticity in the actual, literal dark. You have a man working in the coal mines all day, physically exhausted, covered in soot. But after his grueling shift, what does he do?
He doesn't just collapse. He lights a lamp and he studies, he reads books.
And his peers, the other miners, they mocked him for it. Why are you reading? What's the point? You're a miner. That's all you'll ever be.
They were defining him by his current environment, his present reality.
Correct. They were only seeing the now. They were trapped in the market mindset. But he was operating from the field mindset. He was seeing the potential. He was literally physically rewiring his brain in that lamplight.
Building new neural pathways.
Building new neural pathways for management, for engineering, for ownership, while his body was still physically swinging a pickaxe. He was becoming the man he needed to be, long before the evidence of it appeared in his life.
And of course, eventually, he became the foreman, then the owner of the mine. The source draws a powerful conclusion from this. It says, "A man who cannot serve without a witness cannot command with honor."
Just think about the deep psychology of that statement for a second. If you need a witness, if you need a boss standing over your shoulder or the promise of applause to do your best work, then your work doesn't really belong to you.
It belongs to the witness.
It belongs to the boss. You are simply reacting to external authority. But if you can serve in silence, if your standard of excellence is internal, then you are the authority. You become autonomous. You are the source of the standard.
This feels like the right place for our second inquisitive engagement.
This is a diagnostic question. It's really for your own ego, for your own private understanding of yourself.
If the world, starting tomorrow, paid you only for what you do when no one else is watching, how rich would you be in a year? Seriously. Pause and think about it. Strip away your public accolades. Strip away your job title. Strip away everything you post on social media to curate your image. If we could only monetize your private discipline, your hidden kindness, your silent study.
Would you be a billionaire? Or would you be bankrupt?
It forces you to look at the dark matter of your own life. That invisible mass that you don't see, but which actually holds your entire personal galaxy together.
The law of hidden seeds says you are always planting something. The question is never if you are planting.
The only question is what? Are you planting seeds of resentment, of laziness, of cutting corners, or are you planting seeds of service, of excellence, of integrity?
So let's transition now. We've planted the seeds in the dark. That's the first step. But seeds without direction are just, well, they're just chaos.
Exactly. This brings us to part 2, the law of definite direction. This law pivots from the concept of work to the concept of aim. The source talks about the mind that commands circumstance.
And they use a very visceral, very powerful image to describe the opposite of this. The wheel spinning in mud. Oh, we have all felt that, haven't we? That feeling of high RPM. The engine is screaming. The energy you're expending is massive. You're exhausted at the end of the day.
But your displacement is 0. You're in the exact same spot. Or the other analogy they use, the horse running in circles on a track. It runs until it collapses from exhaustion, but it ends up exactly where it started.
The source calls this a profound biological inefficiency. Energy without a vector is just waste. It's heat, it's noise, it doesn't accomplish anything.
So we have to define what definite direction actually is. The source gives a very precise definition. It says, purpose is not a wish. It is a command given to thought.
A command given to thought. Let's just break down the neuroscience of that specific phrase.
Okay.
Your brain is, at its core, a goal-seeking servo mechanism. It is designed to solve problems and move towards targets. But it needs a clear coordinate. If you just say, oh, I wish I were happier, or I'd like to be successful someday, that is not a coordinate.
That's a mood. It's a vague desire.
It's fog. The brain can't lock onto it. But if you say, I will build this specific thing by this specific date, and here's a first step, that is a command.
And when you issue a command like that, something in the brain activates.
The reticular activating system, the RAS we mentioned earlier, wakes up. It gets its new marching orders. Remember, the RAS is the future. Your senses are taking in millions of bits of data every single moment. You can't possibly process all of it. You would go insane.
So the RAS has to filter out almost everything.
It filters out 99.9% of it. And when you have no direction, when you're just drifting, what does it filter for? It filters for comfort and safety. It looks for threats and simple pleasures.
What happens when you give it a definite direction, a command?
It starts filtering for the goal. The source says, thought fixed upon a clear end organizes all unseen forces in its favor. All of a sudden, you overhear the exact conversation you need to hear in a coffee shop. You walk past a bookstore, and the one book you need is facing out in the window. You meet the person who has the answer you were looking for.
It looks like magic. It feels like serendipity or unseen forces.
But it's actually just attention mechanics. You are finally seeing the path that was always there, hidden in the noise. Your brain is now programmed to see the signal.
The source gives a great illustration of this with the story of Dr. Frank Gonzalez.
This is such a powerful case study in what the source calls the power of decision. Here's a man, he needs to raise $1 million for college. In that time, that was a massive, almost impossible sum of money.
And he has no big donor lined up. He has no guaranteed plan.
He has nothing except a decision, a definite, irreversible decision. He gets up in the pulpit one Sunday and he announces it to the world. We're doing this.
Notice the language. He didn't say, we are going to try. He didn't say, I hope we can do this, or if the economy is good, we'll give it a shot.
No. He stated it as a fact that had already been accomplished in his own mind. And that certainty is a biological signal. It's contagious. When a leader is uncertain and wishy-washy, the tribe feels unsafe and scatters.
But when a leader is certain...
When a leader has that definite direction, the tribe aligns. People, resources, opportunities, they all start to flow towards that certainty. And of course, a donor stepped forward, because the decision created a vacuum, a container for the money to flow into. Nature abhors a vacuum.
And then there's the ultimate example, Abraham Lincoln.
Lincoln's entire life, if you look at it, was a series of catastrophic failures. Business failures, bankruptcy, deep depression, losing election after election. By any normal measure, he was a failure for most of his life.
But he had one thing.
He had one single, definite, unshakable aim: to preserve the Union. That was it.
That was his North Star.
That was his ultimate filter. Every decision, every military strategy, every casualty, every political policy was run through that one single algorithm. Does this action help preserve the Union? Yes or no? It simplified a world of impossible complexity down to a binary choice.
The source gives a stark warning about the opposite. It says, a mind that changes aim every week is like a compass spinning madly.
And then it says, indecision is the thief of life. That phrase that should haunt every single one of us.
Thief of life? Why?
Because indecision doesn't just steal time. It steals your cognitive load. It runs in the background of your mind like an open app on your phone, constantly draining your battery. Should I do this or should I do that? What if I'm wrong? That loop is biologically exhausting.
So this seems like the perfect spot for our third inquisitive engagement.
This one requires some real honesty. Ask yourself this.
Are you waiting for the path to clear before you finally decide what you want to do? Or will you decide so that the path can clear?
Think about that distinction. Most of us are waiting. We're waiting for a sign. We're waiting for safety. We want a guarantee from the universe before we make the first move.
But the law of definite direction says that's backwards. The path is created by the decision. It's like driving a car at night. The headlights only show you the next 200 feet of road.
You have to actually start driving to see the rest of the journey. If you wait in your driveway for the fog to lift on the entire 500-mile trip,
You will never leave.
you will die in the driveway. And that is the quiet tragedy of the drifter.
Okay, so let's move to the final piece of the puzzle, part 3. The law of inner expansion. This is where the source gets explicitly biological about how we actually build the capacity to handle the success we're aiming for.
The premise here is simple, but it can be brutal to accept. And it's this: the size of your success will always equal the size of yourself that carries it.
So success isn't an object you go out and conquer. It's a weight you have to be strong enough to carry.
That is the perfect analogy. Imagine your character, your discipline, your emotional resilience. Imagine all of that as a container. If you have a tiny thimble-sized character and the universe tries to pour a gallon of success on you, what happens?
It just spills everywhere. It's wasted. Or it breaks the thimble.
It destroys the thimble. This is exactly what we see with people who achieve massive fame too quickly, or people who win the lottery. They get the result without having done the inner expansion. Their nervous system wasn't wired to handle that level of voltage, and they collapse under the weight of the blessing.
So the question becomes, how do we expand the container? How do we get stronger? And the source points directly to the neuroscience of habit.
It says, and I'm quoting here, that repetition engraves thought upon the nervous system.
Engraves. That's such a physical word, like carving into stone.
Because it is a physical process, we're talking about something called myelination. Every single time you repeat a thought or an action, you fire a specific neural circuit in your brain. At first, that circuit is like a little dirt path through a forest. It has high resistance. It's hard to walk down.
But if you keep walking down it,
If you keep repeating the action, the brain says, oh, this path is important. And it starts to wrap that neural fiber in myelin, which is a fatty sheath that acts like insulation on a wire. And it makes the electrical signal travel faster and with much less energy loss. The dirt path becomes a paved road, then a superhighway.
this is what the source is talking about with autosuggestion. It isn't just wishful thinking.
No, it's not fantasy.
Yeah.
It is daily self-command. The source explains it this way: will opens the door, but habit keeps it open.
And we rely way too much on willpower, don't we? We think we can just force our way to success.
Willpower is just a spark. It's a finite resource. It literally burns glucose in your brain. You cannot run a marathon on a single spark. You need the deep, automated engine of habit. The source says, discipline practiced long enough becomes pleasure. The act becomes instinct.
That's the crossover point. That's the goal. When the hard thing, through repetition, finally becomes the easy thing, the default thing.
And the source gives us that great analogy of the blacksmith's hammer. One single blow of the hammer on a piece of cold steel does almost nothing. 100 blows do a little, but thousands and thousands of blows.
That's what shapes the steel.
You are the steel. Your daily habits are the hammer. Every single day, you are shaping yourself with these tiny, repetitive blows.
Thomas Edison is the master of this principle. The 10,000 failures to invent the light bulb.
But Edison had this incredible reframe. He said they weren't failures. He said, I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work.
So he wasn't failing, he was just collecting data.
He was systematically mapping the territory of the problem. He was expanding his internal simulation of reality until it finally matched the external physical reality. Each failure was another repetition, another swing of the hammer that engraved a new pathway in his brain.
And then there's the writer mentioned in the source, 15 years of rejection slips.
15 years. Can you imagine the psychological toll of that? The sheer number of times he had to pick himself back up. But the source doesn't call it 15 years of failure. It calls it invisible preparation.
And when he finally broke through and became a massive success,
Everyone on the outside called it overnight success. They called it luck. But the source says his success had, by that point, become inevitable.
inevitable. That is the goal, isn't it? To do the inner work, the expansion, to the point where success isn't something you're chasing anymore. It's something that has to come to you.
Because you have simply become too dense with value. You're too prepared. Your character's too expanded. The world eventually has to yield to that kind of internal mass.
Which brings us to our next, and maybe most practical, inquisitive engagement.
Just look at the architecture of your average day.
If your habits are the architecture of your future, what kind of house are you building for yourself right now?
If we were to take your last 24 hours and just extrapolate that out for the next 20 years, would you be living in a cathedral of your own making? Or would you be living in a ruin?
Every choice you make is a brick. Every moment of focused work is a support beam. Every compromise, every time you take the easy way out, is a crack in the foundation.
You are both the architect and the builder, and the strangest part is you have to live inside the house while you're still building it.
So we need to put all this together. We have to synthesize it. We've talked about hidden seeds, definite direction, and inner expansion. The source says the final step is moving from impulse to law.
And it calls this transition by a single word: maturity.
Moving from impulse to law, what does that mean in practice?
The immature mind, which is where most of us live most of the time, operates on reactive biology. I am hungry, I am tired, I'm scared. It's driven by impulse. And because it feels powerless, it asks for miracles. Please, just let me get lucky this one time.
And the mature mind?
The mature mind doesn't ask for miracles, it asks for law. It says, I am planting, I am directing my energy, I am expanding my capacity. It understands that the universe operates on cause and effect, not luck. It moves from magical thinking to mechanical understanding.
From pay me first to I plant in faith.
And we have to be very clear about the word faith in this context. It is not blind belief. The source gives a beautiful, functional definition of faith. Faith is sustained motion under invisible law.
Sustained motion is an action verb. Just keep moving.
Keep moving, keep planting, even when the field looks barren and empty, even when the rain is falling and everyone else has gone inside.
Carnegie's ultimate secret, the source says, wasn't just his money. It was his ability to get many minds organized in harmony to a definite end. He built a mastermind.
But he could only do that because he himself was a definer, not a drifter. Drifters cannot organize anything, they only disperse energy.
We are getting near the end of our transmission today, and the source leaves us with one final urgent message. It's a warning about time.
It says, time is not coins. You cannot earn it back.
The choice, then, is incredibly clear. You can spend the next 25 years wandering, paying what the source calls the costly tuition of life, learning everything through pain, failure, and regret. Or you can begin what the source calls the update right now.
The update. I love that term. It's the conscious shift from being a victim of your own biology to becoming the master user of it.
The source ends with this one last provocative thought. Greatness is only character matured by time.
So here is the final question we want to leave you with today, the one to really carry with you.
If the next 25 years of your life were a person, and that person was sitting right beside you now, invisible, holding a notebook, waiting to see what you decide to do today, what will you show them?
Will you show them the same old patterns, the same hesitation, the same drifting? Or will you show them the beginning of a new law in your life?
The hidden seed is in your hand. The rain is starting to fall, and that nobody, that inconvenience is standing right in front of you.
What will you do?
That is the deep dive.
End of transmission.